Our speakers today, we have with us Bethany Ayers Fisher. She is the Sustainability Manager for the City of Reading, and also Deborah Hoag, who is the Engineering Division Manager for the City of Reading. They're going to be speaking to you on the topic of the City of Reading's wastewater treatment upgrades, which have gone from consent decree to compliance. Some really interesting facts about the Reading sewer system that I'm sure they're going to be able to cover during this. So I'll turn to them.
So hi, I'm Bethany Ayers Fisher, Sustainability Manager for the City of Reading, and my colleague Deborah Hoag, who manages all of the pipes and fun reasons why we're here today. There we go. Okay, so at Public Works, we are the stewards of our built natural resources. We do a whole lot of things, all the things on the screen, and our main goal is to make sure that we have a healthy, beautiful, great place to live, work, play, and we all want nice things. So that's our basic job. Also, it's in the Pennsylvania Constitution. We have the right to natural resources, so the right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic and aesthetic values of the environment. As trustee, the Commonwealth, and all of the political subdivisions of Commonwealth, so whether it's a city, a township, or borough, also have that responsibility. And it was passed in 1971. So why wastewater treatment? It's a public health initiative. It's a absolute miracle compared to where we were 150 years ago. And it can remove the harmful bacteria, viruses, parasites, etc. Compared to the 1800s, basically pre-World War II, on back where there were very active cholera, typhoid, cryptosporidium outbreaks are now very rare in areas with the wastewater treatment. Only about half of the world's population has access to a wastewater treatment plant, and the areas, especially in warmer, poorer areas of the world, are still struggling with these common outbreaks. Also, ecological health, it reduces the eutrophication risk on a river, and also harmful algal blooms, and ammonia toxicity for fish and macroinvertebrates. So Reading, so welcome to Reading. We are at the confluence point of 5 watersheds and midway point of the Schuylkill River. Downriver from us, about 2.5 to 3 million people get their drinking water from the Schuylkill River. So, hi, welcome to your source water protection. But Reading had a very interesting population curve from when we were founded in the 1740s. So we are now, I think, 278 years old in March. But we basically did from about 1800 to about 1900, we doubled our population every 10 years. So that's a lot of growth, and obviously it's a lot of poop. So having to deal with that became a critical thing for the city of Reading. On the 1894 map, which was right at the kind of as we were peaking in population, we are the black blurb kind of up. That is the city, and then you can see all of the watersheds marked out here. One of the really interesting things that was happening in the 1800s, we were seeing more and more epidemics happening. And the first epidemic, and this is the data from the 1932 cholera epidemic, which was the first one that happened in the United States. 1832. And you can see Philadelphia is the long, like on the first part and the second part, that is Philadelphia's pandemic or epidemic numbers. So it was 44 days, and they lost over 2,300, or they had over 2,300 cases. They had 765 deaths and over 2,000 known cases. So where you see the blank dashes for like Norristown, they didn't have any known cases. Doesn't mean they didn't have any cases. Reading had about a 37-day outbreak where they had 17 cases and 17 deaths. In other watersheds, for Erie, for example, they had 22 cases and 11 deaths. This is a really horrific disease. So for those of you who don't know what cholera is, it is an intestinal disease. It's caused by a parasite. And basically the parasite eats away at the epithelial lining of your guts. And the telltale symptom that you're looking for is called rice water diarrhea. And the little grains of whites are literally your guts. It's much easier to prevent than it is to treat. And it still happens today. It could come back if we would lose our wastewater treatment plants. It could come back. But it's a really critical public health issue that was solved because we did wastewater treatment. So now that I've scared you all and grossed you out a little bit, I'm going to turn you over to Deb, who's going to go through the process and the decisions that created the wastewater treatment plant we have today and where we're going in the future.
So Beth's kind of given you some, and I hope you can hear me, some information for kind of why do we really treat it. What you're seeing there is something that was published by the Franklin Institute at one of their meetings when the city was looking at wastewater treatment from the 1880s into the 1890s and making some big decisions. But as they say, the usual abominations and annoyances of a cesspool city had reached the point where they must be eradicated and a modern method substituted. So in the 1890s, we needed to come up with a modern method for how we were going to deal with things. And quite honestly, we did a lot of we're going to learn from other people. So when you look at what you're doing, you've got cesspools every place you go. You've got a large city that continues to grow. And you want to make sure you don't make the same mistakes anybody else did. I had the pleasure, I guess I'll say, of learning when my oldest graduated from high school and picked the two cities she wanted to go to for a trip. Seattle was a great one to learn from. We're looking at everything on the East Coast, but if you want to see something interesting, Seattle had the problems of the river as it went up and down, the wastewater that had gone out to the river would now come back in. So when it rained, the wastewater is backing up right into the area. They lucked out and had a huge fire and built the city like 12 feet higher. So they have something very different now than what they had. What we did here was we were trying to learn from everybody else and look at things more holistically as we go through things. So we had a few really key decisions that were made early on. For the collection system, in the United States, everybody was combining their systems. You get the stormwater in there, it washes your pipes. You don't need to worry about keep maintaining 2 feet per second velocity because that stormwater is going to wash it right through. But in Europe, land was at more of a premium. They wanted to have less land for a treatment plant, so they kept them separate. You have less, it has to be treated. The city, thankfully, I'll say today, made a very important choice. Our forefathers were great. We're separate. They also learned from some of the other places, and they wanted to have the sewage flow by gravity to the lowest part of the city and then get it out of there. So by doing that, you're not having the river level impact what you're doing. The influent to this pumping station is the same 54-inch brick sewer we have today. So our urban water cycle, when you look at it, we have our clean water and our wastewater and stormwater all separate. The water system started in 1821 up in Hampton Springs Park and had little chunks added from time to time as areas grew. So the area that we're in right now was part of the Angelica Water and Ice Company, and I want to say it was the 1870s or 80s. Stormwater, we started putting in pipes in the 1870s in the city. We had a lot of open swales and things before that, but actually putting it in pipes to try to get it away started before we tried to get the wastewater away. using house sewers, as they were called. So if you're in an older city, I'm looking at Scott going, the one funny thing is, our manholes say house. And people say, why doesn't it say sanitary sewer? Because it's really old, so it says house. So it's one of the ways that you can tell. For the pumping station itself, there were some key decisions that were made. They knew the general area they wanted to be. They picked an area. It was only 250 feet from the Schuylkill River, and there was actually a Union Canal lock for the navigation company 150 feet away. It has a blessing and a curse to it, and we'll just say that everything, all the choices in life we make, both a blessing and a curse. Everything could flow by gravity to that low point. And we continued to have everything flowing by gravity to that low point until the 1950s. Preliminary treatment was occurring at the pumping station. The pumping station was constructed before the treatment plant. You need to get all your pipes coming together first. So by putting preliminary treatment there, you're also trying to take care of some of it. If you see in the picture there from the original plant, nice big smokestack. With that smokestack, we also need to have a fireproof building. Think about some of the big fires that have happened over time. Definitely a smart choice. And initially, we had 2 pumps that were capable of conveying 5 million gallons a day. Preliminary treatment. You think, what can that be? You're in an anthracite coal area. You've got coke screening beds, and you're removing grease. Then you're heating it and drying it for the screenings. We're using air around the flue so that we're able to take advantage of the differences in the temperatures to get airflow and improve the airflow. And we put in big skylights because light is really good. It helps to purify the water. And just so you understand, there was absolutely no unpleasant or offensive odors in or around that building where we are heating and drying grease. I think perhaps deodorant wasn't around at that time, or people's noses were different. But again, then we made some key decisions at the purification and disposal plant. We didn't want it to be in the city itself. So it is way out there. Half miles crow flies from here. So you can see it's way out in the rural area. It's on the opposite side of the Schuylkill River from the bulk of the city. In reading some of the journals, which are very, for an engineering geek, very interesting, to do the pump station, that force main crossing the Schuylkill River, they constructed across the Schuylkill River and would raise up a section of pipe, float out the next one, raise it up, do the joint, lower it back down again, float out the next section of pipe. And they did this so they could put in one 450-foot long pipe section into the Schuylkill River. The treatment plant itself was slow sand filtration. And again, we've got light and air because those are really good things for us. And the microorganisms that are going to take care of the treatment. According to what they tell us, that was 98 to 99% of the original, what was in the wastewater from the homes, was removed at that point. Now, what you're seeing on the slide there is actually what they call the old beds. They were the old beds in the 1906 era. The original beds were 2 layers separated with 10 feet in between for air to pass through, but really a lot of splashing of water. For the perspective on construction and operations, you will notice that there is the horse out there when we started to do things on Fritz Island for digging. The gentlemen are wearing their 3-piece suits with ties for construction. Do not forget your hat. And the poor sucker who's in the bottom picture is standing in the middle of wastewater spraying. So things were a little bit different. OSHA was not yet in existence. The part that I find most interesting is actually the excerpt of a engineering textbook that my husband gave me, which talks about egg-shaped sewers, because we knew we had them in the storm sewer system. And when in constructing a force main within the last year, we learned we actually have egg-shaped sewers elsewhere where our mapping says they're elliptical. but they're actually egg-shaped. So if you want to think, and ironically, my engineering colleague and I both took a class on egg-shaped sewers. So it's a really interesting concept when you think about it, that as your flow increases, you're able to continue to scour the pipe because you're now conveying more flow. Kind of like they used to use inverted siphons, and now you don't hear anybody using inverted siphons. But from an engineering perspective, it's really cool. When you start to look at determining what is the actual, what would be the equivalent in a diameter of pipe, it is a funky length of calculations because you have 3 different circles to calculate for what it is. And quite honestly, if you look at the bottom of that, there are the old and the new egg-shaped sewers back in the 1800s. But it gives you a very different perspective for how we do things now. Part of me wonders if the choice to use egg-shaped sewers, which we have on some of our larger transmission mains, if that was based on the experience of a 54-inch circular pipe that we originally had going into the pump station. The Fritz Island wastewater treatment plant is what we have today. Fritz Island was an iron mine. It flooded in the 1880s. There's a lot of articles that were written about it. There's still some people that can find things. There's some particular type of funkiness about the ore people look for Fritz Island for. But we started moving the treatment plant there in 1906. By the late 1920s, we had everything over there, both liquid and solid. And what you're seeing here is a 1940 map by the USGS. As you look at the island, and we don't have a good cursor there, do we? If you look at the island right here, there's a distinct line. The city only bought part of the island originally. So someone else owned the other part of it, and poor Ms. Archer was stuck with the treatment plant. But it was away from the population. So this 1940s map really shows you how much it was farmlands around there and for where we are today. As the city grew, as Beth alluded to, the city grew by leaps and bounds at times. So here you're kind of looking at the city. These are what we call our sewer districts, with number 1, bottom center, being right around 6th and Canal where the pump station was originally constructed. So you can see we kind of were adding on to things around there, and as the population grew more toward the center of the city, then you kind of come back down again at times as there's a little bit more growth and industrial growth into the hillside. So we gradually have more and more. As you look at the bottom left of the screen is the 18th Ward, where we have a number of municipalities that have flow coming through there, and the top left of the screen is the 19th Ward, which has, again, a few more municipalities coming in there. And you start to see that the city, when you're looking at this map, the center and the multicolors in the very, very center is the city. The colored and shaded areas outside of that are the areas that are served by the treatment plant. You will notice that next to the city, let me see if I can do this I'm not left-handed, there we go. In this area, right on the edge of the city, there's actually another treatment plant. So that area is sewered. Don't worry about that. That area is sewered. But it allowed for more growth of the suburban area to happen more quickly. When you start to kind of look at where things came from, the 6th and Canal pump station has a good chunk of flow that comes in through it. We have some things that come in through other areas, and we've got 2 main areas. About 85% of our flow comes in through 6th and Canal. So we're pumping millions of gallons a day, every day, under the Schuylkill River. But we are still having, today, grit and screening removal happens at 6th and Canal. We stayed with a lot of the original decisions that were made in the 1890s, still apply today. The Fritz Island Grit Chamber takes care of flows that are coming in from another direction, and again, has screening and grit removal. So you'll see there's only a couple little lines that come in without having any type of screening and grit removal. And the one in common is, well, what the municipality that where we are now used to be. As we grew and were able to take in more flow, we had some very prestigious people designing things for us. The textbook I had in college talked about the Reading Wastewater Treatment Plant as having the world's largest trickling filter plant. 212 feet in diameter. We had 4 of them that size. It's quite something to see, and we'll kind of give you some perspectives on it as we go. The city started in 1893 making the decision to treat the wastewater. The liquid side expanded onto Fritz Island starting in 1906, but kept the solids on the opposite side where the original plant was. By 1929, we had fixed nozzle filter beds, rock media, because that was where there was. 1950s, we had a lot of growth. We started to serve the suburban areas surrounding us, and we also constructed 2 pumping stations for larger areas that the city had recently acquired from neighboring municipalities that are now townships of the first class, so that the city will no longer acquire their land. 1958 is when we actually did a huge updates. The trickling filters, we had clarification between the 2 stages. We had primary clarifiers, final clarifiers, elutriation tanks. You don't see them or hear about them too often anymore, but when you have a trickling filter plant, it's a great way to try to concentrate your solids before you digest them. And we had 3 anaerobic digesters. In 1983, we constructed another final clarifier because one that was a final clarifier had to become an intermediate. You couldn't have that much flow coming through, and we kept having, you can clog your rock media. When you have a rock media trickling filter and it's not super deep, it was only 6 foot deep, it's really easy to get it clogged. So by allowing the Schmutzdecke layer that comes off, that biological layer sloughing off, by allowing that to settle out, it makes it that the next stage of treatment is better. We did a capacity upgrade in the late 80s and added a 3rd system with submerged fixed film and another set of clarifiers and more digesters. And you can see with this many layers of fixed film media that by 2000 the odor issue was evident. In looking at how the Fritz Island treatment plant has grown, this kind of puts it in perspective with the ages of tanks and what was in service. If you look in the middle, the single green tank was from 1929. That tank was in service until the most recent upgrades occurred. A lot of tanks from 1958, some that we added. Then when you start to look, there's one for the 1983, another chunk being added. And then you start to see we have odors and doing improvements to solids. As the plant gets bigger, so do the needs for other things to support and just the room in buildings. So from the regulatory and compliance side, we had DER come around in 1971, did we decide? Which then became DEP as we have today, and they had the Clean Streams Law. Initially, the Department of Health handled a lot of things for how it was with wastewater side. But we had consent orders. We were cutting edge in the 1890s. We were still cutting edge as we introduced secondary treatment. And in I want to say it was 1908, we were the first with secondary treatment. Yeah, okay. It went downhill pretty fast. We had consent orders and agreements that would compel us to construct things, so that by the time we were in the 50s heading into the 80s, some of the headlines would read things like, city engineer says that the regulators wanted a $50,000 fine, but we talked them down to 12. It didn't say we solved the problem. It said we talked down the fine. We ended up with a sewer connection ban, and DEP was issuing letters on a monthly basis to us and each of the municipalities that contributes to us for how many new connections there can be. I used to be able to say it before I moved, but the house that I had lived in should have flowed to the city of Reading, but instead it went to the Township of Spring Treatment Plant because the city was under the sewer connection ban. When you think about it, to have a sewer connection ban in the 80s, think about the growth and how many new housing developments went in the 1980s, early 90s. It was huge. There was a lot of fines, air quality issues. We also had a separate COA at one time with the EPA for industrial pretreatment. All that really leads us to these series of phone calls that started in 2003 with somebody saying, we're trying to find somebody associated with the city of Reading water to talk about their effluent. And someone finally pieced together that the City of Reading Water Authority doesn't have effluent. They have potable water, but the wastewater side does have effluent. And we sat down the first time, April 24th of 2003, down in Center City, Philadelphia, to talk to the fine folks at the Department of Justice, EPA, and DEP. In a little over a year and a half, we reached consensus as to what we were going to do. They started with a very prescriptive list of what they wanted us to do, and we had to counter with a list of the reasons why the different actions they were prescribing wouldn't function with the facility that we had. It took not quite a year till the actual judge, between all the public advertisements and the protocol that must be followed to have a consent order that's going to be court enforced, till that occurred. Very detailed as to what was going on. Remedial measures for the plant, things to do for the interim operations of the plant, things to look at the whole of the plant, the collection system, industrial pretreatment, and even how the funding structures were set up. To date, from then till, I can say now, there have been 4 modifications to the consent decree, and they basically involved progress dates and how we looked at the collection system, so that some of the pump station projects were included to ensure that that was taken care of. This is the treatment plant as it existed after the 2000 upgrades for solids handling and air quality, and until we really started construction in 2016. So the large, dark, inverted L are actually your 212-foot diameter trickling filters to kind of give the rest of the plant perspective. The lighter green on the one side is the Mifflin arm of the Schuylkill River. On the other side is the Schuylkill River itself. So it kind of gives you a feel for how big things are. The liquid process had forward flow. When you're looking at it, you're going through a trickling filter. You're clarifying it. You're going through a pump station, all of your flow. You're going through another trickling filter. You're going through a pump station, all of your flow. Clarifying it, now you're going into yet another biological treatment. Final clarifier, chlorination, dechlorination. So forward flow was pumped completely twice. And 85% of my flow came from 6th and Canal. So I've basically pumped all my flow 3 times. It's a lot of money for electricity. The solid side was pretty straightforward. Some chemical additions using gravity belt thickeners, which is kind of like a belt filter press, but you don't get as high a percent solids, but it makes it more efficient when you're in your digesters. Anaerobic digesters, one of them could hold gas. All of them at that time had floating covers. Into a solids building where it went through the belt filter presses. Out we go, and we return the liquid back to the head of the plant. Fairly simple. The consent decree studies and construction, the remedial measures were really focusing a lot of how we ran the facility. Maintenance management, and a lot of these things we already had. It was a matter of making them more formalized, better documented, really. So we had a computerized maintenance management system. We already had a SCADA system to be able to track what was happening at places throughout the plant. The influent and process control monitoring, we didn't have one central place that was done, so we had to do a lot of calculations for that. We had certified operators, not as many of them as we should, and not one on every shift. We had operations and maintenance plans, but again, not as formal as they wanted. When you look at the wastewater treatment side, the plant was rated for 28.5 million gallons a day. One thing we had to do is evaluate the existing plant. So we had a firm that had one of the premier in the country trickling filter experts who actually did his doctoral dissertation on the trickling filter calculations that are used to evaluate their efficiencies and capacities. We learned a lot. When you start to take into account the highest strength, the highest flows, and the lowest temperatures, we were lucky to be able to get 10 MGD through the plant and still be in compliance. Remember that part when we get to the end. We did a capital improvements plan looking at different alternatives, did a special study for Act 537 as required by the state, which helped to put together how big did the plant need to be? What did we see for growth? Where did we see redevelopment? Where did other municipalities see initial development? Were there places that were zoned in a way that they could be, the land could be used differently? What's the highest and best use? There were meetings occurring with all the different municipalities to try to determine that. We came up with a basic plan that had rehabbing some digesters first, a laboratory admin building because we had had a laboratory between two digesters, when a link seal allows the methane gas and the hydrogen sulfide from the digester gas to escape into the space between. And the staff member's quote was, "If this were a confined space, I'd have to evacuate." My response was, "Consider it a confined space right now and get out." So we had to find a place to put the laboratory. We had had the laboratory function out of a conference room for months, and we actually had a complex, I'll say, of rented laboratory trailers where two of the trailers came from the Passaic Valley water treatment plant when they were doing upgrades and were fully outfitted with laboratory counters, ovens, hoods, you name it. It had, and I'll say, an electrical capacity that was very nice. But it was what we needed at the time, and we used that for a long time. Liquid treatment, solids handling, the basics of wastewater there. The collection system side, I can't read that. Thank you. The collection system side, mapping was a big thing. Mapping, do an evaluation of the program as a whole, of the system as a whole, pull together a rehabilitation plan similar to the capital improvement plan. That had us looking at the pump stations more so that 6th and Canal was getting improvements with treatment, pumping, the force mains, and the 19th Ward pump station, which we'd constructed in the late 50s, early 60s. So the 6th and Canal pump station today is very similar. Arched windows. The smokestack is gone, but arched windows, preliminary treatment still occurring there. The current process flow is much simpler. I can fit it on one slide. And you basically have one tank in the middle here that is where all the biological action is occurring. Much, much simpler. So Fritz Island 2020 to you tell me when, looks like this. There have been a lot of different changes. And I'll say it's not an easy thing to construct when you have something in service. But we went through, now we have the first, kind of going through the slides, we have one place where all the influent comes together. We have blowers that ramp up and down, turn on and off based on what the needs are, based on the dissolved oxygen. We have fine bubble diffusers in the reactors. The reactors are each approximately the size of a football field. We were able to reuse a number of tanks. We reused the primary clarifiers. They were from the 1950s. The chlorine contact tank was from the 1950s. The chlorine contact tank is now what was the tertiary aeration from the 1980s. The solids side, we kept the same solids building, put an addition onto it, and switched from belt filter presses to centrifuges. Initially, the digesters were supposed to have an additional secondary digesters, but in some cost-cutting measures, we are still just primary digestion now, with the existing digesters having been rehabilitated. Air quality, not major changes, just some rehabilitation there, but the influent junction box does require the air to be treated. The city achieved a number of goals with the improvements. Now our big pump stations, our two big pump stations, they have redundant force mains. So we're able to take a force main in or out of service. For 6th and Canal, for the flows that we can get from there, we need, if we have all 6 pumps running, we need to have the second force main open. We've gotten rid of the redundancy with the forward flow. All the influent flow goes to a single point. We had a number of treatment tanks before that were in the floodplain. So as the Schuylkill River rose when it did in 2006, so did our plant. To the point where we had an area approximately the width of a Ford Explorer that you could drive in one area, and it was the Schuylkill River that you're touching here, and the treatment plant you're touching there, and the waters were all intertwined. So we got rid of that. We also have additional space, as you saw in the picture, large football field area for additional liquid treatment. There have been some challenges. The design was done and redone and sat for a time while there were some value engineering changes to take care of some cost issues. Some of the big ones were really that there was a different treatment technology, means a different type of operator certifications required. You're no longer a fixed film, you're now an activated sludge plant. Your process control things are totally different. We had, when we made the switch, I believe we had 3 people who had ever operated an activated sludge plant. And that includes one of them that was only an industrial plant. So that was definitely an issue. We also didn't have much experience with centrifuges for dewatering. The focus on everything had been liquid treatment, so the digestion and the solid side didn't have as much attention, and we've had to make some changes, and we still have to do a little bit more. And the new facility really doesn't have as much operational flexibility. The old facility, there were things that were thought out so deliberately, and the way it grew, there was a lot of flexibility. As we tried to overcome some things, we realized that we had hydraulic imbalances many places in the plant. So activated sludge, one of the key things is that you're returning that microlife as it settles in the clarifier, you're returning it back to the head of the aeration basin. We had a big imbalance there hydraulically. Fixed weirs. There's just trying to take a tank out of service can be very challenging. Chlorinating the RAS is something that you do for process control. If you have the wrong type of microlife, you want to add chlorine and kill the bad guys. But the building that had the injection point wasn't designed to have chlorine gas in it. So we had a chlorine gas leak, and nobody knew it before they went to enter the building. I had 2 employees retire very shortly thereafter. And we no longer use chlorine gas for that purpose. We actually maintained something that was temporary during construction because you can use sodium hypochlorite as well. It's more expensive, but it is safer. Without staff, we are nothing. So that's what we do. The reactor itself has 3 zones. It's actually set up to convert to a 5-stage Barden flow to be able to accommodate BNR. We have looked into parts of it, but one of the issues we have is we can't adjust how the flow is coming into the plant as much as we would like to. So we're kind of notching on things gradually. For the final clarifiers, 1 clarifier gets almost half the flow. 1 out of the 4 gets almost half the flow. And we only have stop logs to adjust that. The other thing we did learn is as we were doing the improvements to 6th and Canal, the pumping improvements, which were the last of the improvements that occurred there, it has a huge impact on the reactors and the flow coming in. So we are doing things now to try to tie that together so that we have communication from the pump station to the plant directly to the reactors so that we can get ready for the flow before it gets there. How do we really figure some of these things out? We have a project management, construction management team that we've been working with since, I'll say the last 20 years. We started working with an operational person that they have, one of their operational process engineers. When we had a major process upset, we started with phone calls to review data. We make 1 change at a time. There's no knee-jerk reactions. It's micro-life. They're microorganisms. You treat it like your own self. You can't change too much at once. It's not going to go well. We also had a lot of on-site visits so that we would schedule them, and at one point it was like every other week somebody was coming down from New York to give us a hand with things. We also recognized that with a staff with limited experience, one of the key things was training. So we need to be able to learn from our mistakes, laugh at some of them, but we actually had 4 2-hour training sessions done. They were developed for us, they were presented for us, and when someone presents a training session for our plant, you're presenting it 4 times because we're staffed 24/7. It's the way our shift, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 on the one union and A, B, C, D on the other. So 4 times for everything. We also did learn the hard way that the spare parts inventory was not exactly what we would have desired. So this year we have received a rotating bowl assembly for a dewatering centrifuge, $470,000 for one. But after having sent one back to the manufacturer, we had to have the manufacturer come in, help us take it out. The high rotational speeds, you're looking at almost 2 months. You can't go from 2 centrifuges to 1. Now you've got no time for maintenance. You've got nothing. So that was one of the things that we determined. Our team learned how to do things. And quite honestly, that's how we've done it with everything. We've done minor tweaks. We do a lot more monitoring than was initially set up for. We've added monitoring at places that it wasn't originally. We have built additional SCADA screens. We have added flow meters at places so that we can see how things are going. We, instead of doing automation for the RAS normally, we're typically operating it manually so that we can get that dialed in better. Bluntly, staff dedication, persistence, people who want to do the right thing. I have a team of shift supervisors that at one time they wouldn't let the other supervisors that were in the same union take any of that, any overtime related to process. Now they share. So now I've got 6 guys who are able to do things to the point that when someone's on vacation, someone's on FMLA, they're still calling and communicating about things that are happening at the plant because each one seems to have an area of expertise that is slightly unique from the others. And that team working together is what makes it happen. Quite bluntly, it's people. I'm going to hand it back to Beth.
Okay. Alrighty. And after 20 years of struggle, we are seeing great improvements in the condition of the river at Reading. And one of the goals under the Clean Water Act is to make our surface waters drinkable, swimmable, and fishable, and we're starting to achieve that. So the young man is Logan. He's a graduating senior here. He's looking to get into wastewater or any other ecological restoration. I have his resume if anybody's interested. But last summer, I get this text message of him holding a 42-inch muskie that he caught off of the outfall at the wastewater treatment plant. 20 years ago, like when he was born, the fish weren't hanging out at the wastewater treatment plant. It was a dead zone. Now we're raising big fish. And then that's me on the Schuylkill Sojourn last year in the rain. And none of us got sick. So that was a good thing. It was a little chilly that day, but, making these investments into our wastewater is giving us a better river. And that's really important because we like to play. And then some more views of our really pretty plant. You get some nice reflective surfaces sometimes. Questions, thoughts?
Was there ever a time that you used the excrement from the treatment facility as fertilizer? Was it ever put on agricultural farms or anything? Any point?
Looking back, there are times that yes, it was used as fertilizer. I can't tell you the time frame because it is in some of the very old journals. That said, I also had some very entrepreneurial operators that when I first started here that found they could grow all sorts of things there. Read into it as you may. But we've had problems with molybdenum, which is a tracer chemical for cooling towers. And that molybdenum level had been high, and that is one of the reasons that we were not able to do land application of biosolids in the more modern terms and times. We could see the molybdenum level drop when I would make a phone call to 2 different water treatment chemical companies locally, and suddenly the molybdenum would drop. My irony is that molybdenum is a bad boy. It's an expensive one. We don't want it. However, phosphorus is a great alternative, and plants can treat phosphorus. Much more simple. But molybdenum has kept us more recently, and now as we get into some of the other emerging contaminants of concern, we are really just stepping back a little bit. I can't tell you 100% what happens with some of our biosolids right now because our hauler also owns a compost facility. So they have both a landfill and a compost facility. And there are times that we have things that go to the compost facility. I'm not exactly sure what they do from the marketing perspective beyond that. Yes, sir.
So I'm more familiar with the Baltimore city sewage system, but they also made the really good choice of having separate lines way back when, around the same time as Reading did, which is great, but The but is that it's still there, it's falling apart, and so you get major cross-contamination. Is that an issue in Reading as well?
We have a couple of
Deteriorating.
We have a couple other issues. There's times that our mapping might have, on the old maps, you might have the sanitary system mapped, and this map over here is streets and stormwater. And here's another map, and it's streets and water. So sometimes you don't know exactly what pipe somebody was connecting into. So I can picture 2 different places since I've been with the city that have had larger pipes interconnected that should not have been. We also have something called the path of least distance. So when the contractor's going to connect a home, they might have connected to the first pipe they found. We did do smoke testing as part of what we needed to do with the consent decree. So some areas of the city have had smoke testing done, but we also have a slightly different layout in Berks County in that we have a running trap near the curb. So if you picture, if you're smoke testing the system from the manholes, you hit a running trap at the curb, your running trap is going to typically have water in it, and that will stop your flow of smoke. So what you see is when you actually have major problems, more so with someone having rain leaders connected, then you can see that. But some of the other things you don't see as easily. So that we didn't find a whole lot that way, but we were able to find some things. And I will say, we have found things like somebody connecting to a pipe that goes nowhere. We've had a few little interesting ones. But yeah, in general, keeping the system separate has been a good thing. But there are the downfalls to it as well. And I think that's one of the things that we all recognize is every choice you make has a benefit and a cost. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just following up on the separated sewer. You had
Yes, sir.
earlier in your slideshow what might have just been a simplified schematic with the, where there's the wastewater that goes to the treatment plant, there's the stormwater that goes through the pipes. That I was curious, in this like cartoon style diagram, the stormwater is just sort of discharged as is to the body of water. Are there concerns about stormwater picking up contaminants as it, if it's untreated going into the river?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one.
There are some. This is a simplified picture. I forget where I pirated it from, quite honestly. But I honestly, it was pirated because, quite honestly, we have a stormwater pump station which pumps not quite 5 times the max flow through the treatment plant at 84.27. So the storm pump station we have can pump about 360 million gallons a day. Because back when Agnes hit, we had several city blocks that were flooded. Down by 6th and Canal, where the original pump station is, that had a major problem. The canal lock and the navigation company was no longer in business. The canal lock, I do believe, might have become the home for perhaps asphalt shingles, if I've been told. But it was filled in really well then. And we kind of, there was a tank at the treatment plant that has a mark on it for how high the water got on Fritz's Island, and I'll say, and that wasn't in the low-lying area. So yes, we do see excess flows coming in, despite having them separated. On our stormwater system also, from the northern part of the city, we convey a creek via the storm sewer. It's right at the edge between ourselves and another, a township of the first class who I don't believe has someone sitting in the room.
The municipality who shall not be named.
But there we actually take the Bernhardt Creek and it goes underground. It goes through a rack screening system, goes underground, and we have, since Agnes, we now have 2 large 6-foot and 8-foot diameter that ultimately lead to the pumping station. So we did a lot of stormwater improvements at times, and when you talk about contaminants, we've also found things. So we have an area where the stormwater system has, I'll just call it a sedimentation basin. I'm looking at Scott, I think we've got, is it 2 or 3? I'll say that there are areas where it's just for the solids to deposit, and it's maybe 100 yards or so from the discharge point of the Schuylkill River. So we've got some places where we can remove the sediment before it ever hits the river. How did we find them? Quite honestly, by accident, because they're not something that were really discussed as it related to stormwater. But it's one of those things, again, that I'll say, we have been blessed by the decisions of our forefathers. And to me, it's our job to continue to make those types of decisions and to look at things holistically, so that people following us can say the same things. So, thank you, I appreciate that.
No, thank you for.
Go for it.
So I know it's an impossible issue right now, but in terms of like PFAS and endocrine disruptors, I know there's some treatment facilities that are starting to look at possible ways to address that issue. We have a water training that in my area. I'm just wondering where you guys are without some good judgment in the curve of like learning about the issue and starting to look towards solutions.
I'll just start with, we just switched to activated sludge. Many other plants switched there a couple decades ago. Personally, I learned about PFAS about 20 years ago when I was contacted by an industry that wanted to go into a former Western Electric, Bell Telephone, AT&T, Goodyear, I think I got the right order, manufacturing facility. And they wanted to build a component for solar panels. And they told me a lot about their effluent, and they were telling me about these PFOA and PFAS, and I'm like, oh, I'm writing. I'm like, okay. My phone log for that must have been really fun. But I should probably try to go back and try to find it one of these days. But I quickly did what any good engineer does who doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. Hey, EPA, I need help. I've got this industry that wants to come into town, and this is what they're telling me about. And when the guy from EPA in Philly says, yeah, we heard something about that. There's somebody in the Midwest who knows a lot more. Let me connect you. And we started to learn that way. And that was how we first learned anything about PFAS. And it was an education, and we quickly did this doesn't sound good. Whatever they do, when they come in, they're gonna have to treat it there. And we're gonna have to develop something with local limits so that they have to treat it there, because we don't know anything about treating it, and they seem to be the only ones making it that we know of. When the gentleman from the Midwest from the EPA called back a little bit later to say, hey, how's that going with them? I said, they decided to go elsewhere to build their facility. He told us we dodged a bullet. We agreed. I said, thank you very much for all your help, though. And those are still some of the original articles that I have for PFAS. We have not done a whole lot with PFAS at this time. We have delayed doing some things, trying to figure out how to handle the PFAS aspect, because it feels like it's a moving target. And that's one of the concerns, is to make a commitment for something with PFAS, you're trying to guess what the regulators are doing. When we went through things with the consent decree and doing the initial evaluation for treatment alternatives, again, what do? You're an engineer. Hey, DEP, what are my NPD gas limits going to look like? Theoretically, we're doing upgrades, what's it going to look like? And DEP's response was, oh, well, you're in the South Central region, but most of the Schuylkill River is in the Southeast. So wait till I talk to people from the Southeast and I'll get back to you. So we didn't want to go through that.
Problem for us, actually. We're in the wrong watershed. Regulation.
No, we're not. We're definitely not in the wrong watershed when it comes to that.
I mean, the wrong section. We're in the right watershed.
But there's times where it's hard to figure out who's handling what and where the technical answers are coming from. So we try to be very cautious. I did say that funding was a part of the issue with our consent decree. When we met the first time with the Department of Justice, they said that the transfer from the sewer fund to the general fund was to go to zero immediately. All of the improvements initially for building a wastewater system, when you don't have a wastewater system, you don't have a funding source. It is all coming out of taxpayers' money. So one of the attorneys sitting at the table did this. There you go. take the keys to the city, they're yours. We can't do that. And so we actually have a negotiated dollar amount. But we have to be very cautious about how we do things, because we want to make sure we've got to be good stewards all around. So it's what we're doing to the environment, the air side, the water side. How are we handling the solids? How are we handling the finances? We have intermunicipal agreements. They dictate how the rates are calculated. So we have a bunch of different things that kind of tell us what we can and can't do. We try to be really cautious, but we don't want to commit to doing something or say start down the road of a capital improvement, only to find out that that's not where the regulatory side is going, and that is a big fear. So, is there anything else? I'm looking. I'm getting a whirly bird up here,
You need to wrap up.
and I believe there's a gentleman right there.
Did I understand you correctly to say that the population of Reading doubled in 10 years?
Every 10 years for 100 years.
Double. Back in the 1800s.
From 1800 to 1900. Doubled every 10 years.
Oh, that was, okay.
We did a population curve that spiked. Like it is.
It starts looking like a bell-shaped curve.
Yep.
And comes down a little bit, and next thing you know, it's coming right back up again.
Yeah, we're almost at the same population size that we were about 100 years ago.
And your system is predicated on that rate?
Let's think about a couple things, sir, if I may. When the system went in, there were people that were putting in terracotta pipe, 2-foot joints. We tend to have 4 or 5. But what's a new system get? 13-foot sections, SDR 35. You're getting less leaks. You have a better product for your bell joint. You put it on, you flushed back then, we were using 6 gallons per flush, at least. But we're not doing that much in a flush now. So you start to look at things going, we have changes that way. We have industries that are doing more with whitewater and reuse. So you've got different things that change the volume of flow. It doesn't necessarily change the organic content, but it changes the volume. So I'll say we have been blessed by the decisions our forefathers made. And truly everything comes down to people. It is all people. The people who make the decisions, the people who operate the facilities, the people who design, it's people.
Thank you so much. Deborah, thank you.